You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode of the podcast, I speak with triathlete Dirk Bockel. Dirk spent over 27 years competing in triathlon, including in the Olympics. He recently retired from the sport and released a book series sharing all of his experiences in the sport. We talk about his career and those books. I hope you enjoy. Dirk, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Adam. How are you?
I'm doing great. So why don't we just start off with learning a little bit about your athletic background and triathlon background specifically. From what I read, you've been in triathlon for 27 years. So you started very young and had obviously an amazing professional career and an Olympian and such. But can you just kind of talk through how you got into triathlon? And, obviously it's been a passion of yours.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure to talk about a little bit about the career and triathlon in general. So thanks for that, Adam. Well, I started out as a life-saving swimmer as a kid. So that's basically just a couple of sessions per month just to learn some basics for the swim. And when I grew older, I became a handball player. So handball is a big sport, and back then I was German for a long time. I was born and raised in Germany before I changed my nationality, and so those were the two sports that I started out. And I became really fed up with the team sport because I was so into the sport and other guys were not. And so when you're in a team sport and you lose a game, but you give everything you have and other people don't care, that was not really satisfying. So I started with athletics, and I became a 1,000-meter runner and a high jumper. And pretty soon we figured out that my jumping ability and my running ability are the best from all those disciplines that I tried out. And the running coach, he was a triathlete himself. And when he saw me running, he said, "Man, I think you might have a talent for cycling as well."
Yeah.
And little we tried it. And I did my first race, a triathlon race in '89. And that was just a regional championships. And I was fourth. And that was a decent result. But I was also fourth in athletics, which I practiced for a few years. So then we figured out, man, if you do that without training, what could you do when you train? And then just 2 years later, I was already European champion with the team of Germany as a junior. And from there on, it was all about triathlon, and I just gave it a shot and finished my high school, then became professional triathlete, then got involved in the military in Germany, then started to study, and that's when I actually came to the US and got a scholarship as a runner and as a swimmer, because NCAA obviously didn't sponsor any triathletes. So I got there with the purpose of getting better in swimming and running, because back then it was ITU style racing, and that's all about swimming and running. And my biking always seemed to come natural. And from there on, I did my short distance career till 2008, and that was basically the highlight at the Olympics in Beijing. And from there on, I took a little break for a month, and with my partner, I sat down and we talked about, hey, what's the future? Do you want to continue doing that? And I said, yeah, short distance is cool, but I like that long stuff. And my first long distance race in 2009, and from there on, I raced till I just retired last year. So
awesome. So you've seen the sport evolve from the early days of people not really even knowing what to do to train for this thing all the way through. And we'll talk about kind of your book package in a second, because I'm sure you have a lot of lessons learned and a lot to share. But before we go there, just in terms of career highlights, you obviously mentioned the Olympics, but also you've won Challenge Roth, and that's obviously a legendary race, and that had to be a special highlight of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. First, let's talk about the Olympics. As a kid, I was always watching sport events, and mainly the World Championships in athletics, and of course the Olympic Games. And I said, man, that's a dream. I really would love to be there one day. And so I checked off that dream 2008, and then I was back at the drawing board and said, man, if I want to go long distance, I need some really crazy goals in order to keep me going, because I've been in the sport for a long time, and so I need a new challenge. And then I sat down and we sketched some stuff out, and I said, well, I want to be under 8 hours one day. And everybody's like, yeah, right. Go, Dirk. And I said, well, I also want to win an Ironman, and I want to win a medal at the World Championships, and I want to get on the podium in Hawaii. Those were my 4 goals, and I wrote them down, and I was pinning them in the wall over my desk, and I looked at them all the time. And well, then I started out in 2009 with my first Ironman in New Zealand, and right from the first race, I mean, I had a couple of issues before. I changed my running stride. I got injured and prepared the whole race with cross-training, basically. And I still got third, and I qualified for Hawaii. And from there on, it was all about just going to Hawaii. And
yeah.
So that was my, at the end of my career, it turned out that my one goal that I didn't accomplish was making a top 3 in Hawaii. So I had a 4th place, and I came really, really close to that final last podium step to the 3rd place, but I never quite managed it. And apart from that, I don't think, and I don't consider it as a failure, because if you're 4th in Hawaii, you do pretty good, and every time you race, you top 10, it's pretty decent and consistent. And so in terms of other major results, I think, obviously challenge Roth 7:52. That was my fastest time ever, personal best. Lots of national records on the way, and that was great. But there was also Ironman Melbourne, which was when you race in Australia and you go head to head with the likes of Craig Alexander and those guys, Bockel and all those guys. I mean, that was a tough one, and winning that on the run, that's also a specialty, because people always told me, man, Dirk, you're a great swimmer, you're a great cyclist, but, you're running, you're a heavy guy, you're kind of bulky. And I'm like, screw that, man. I'll prove you guys wrong.
Yeah.
And then when I took the lead at kilometer 35, I'm like, well, Dirk, you can actually do that. You can run him down and win an Ironman in the run. And so that was a major personal accomplishment. And of course, it was a championship race. So that's on top of that, that was pretty cool. But apart from all those sport medals or whatever, I got 2 medals at the World Championships, 2 3rd place medals at ITU long distance World Champs. Got a silver at European Champs, and obviously a gold in Asia Pacific. And so that's all cool. But when I changed my nationality from Germany to Luxembourg, it's, I had to learn the language. I had to start from zero, and it's not always easy to really accomplish being liked by the people and being one of them. I got elected Athlete of the Year. That was, on the same level with Gilles Muller, who's top 40 in tennis in the world.
Yeah.
That's WTA. That's pretty solid.
Oh, yeah.
And we have Andy Schleck and Frank Schleck. I mean, I guess that's a big name. And Tour de France, 1st and 2nd place. When I was elected first in front of them, that was for me, like, I was really knighted by the people in Luxembourg, and that was a huge accomplishment apart from the medals, and that felt pretty good.
Yeah, that's a huge honor for sure. So then, as you mentioned, you're now retired from the sport, which is, I'm sure, not an easy thing to do from a professional athlete perspective. But you've now gone on to writing this, this package of books that you're about to release or have released. Sorry, and I want to talk about those. So, what was the catalyst to writing these books? Obviously, you've got all this triathlon experience. Did you feel kind of, a passion or a need to kind of share that with the broader community?
Definitely. Well, the thing is, I've been writing for many years. I've been writing that book for over 4.5 years. And if I would have started at the end of my career, I probably would have written a different book, because now I already have another book in my head, which is, what happens when you retire, because nobody talks about what you go through.
Yeah.
That big ditch that you fall down and nobody cares, and you have to deal with your identity loss and who are you? You're not this athlete anymore. You're just this dude that used to race, and you start gaining weight, and there's suddenly like a little belly, and you just don't look super well trained anymore. You still look skinny and decent for everybody else, but for yourself, you go through all this process. So that's something that's in my mind for the future. when I started writing 4 years ago, I had a lot of athletes asking me if I want to coach them. And I thought it's very time consuming to coach if you want to do it right. I mean, every triathlete is a coach. Every second person is training somebody else and charges crazy amounts of money.
Yeah.
But I'm always questioning where does the knowledge come from? Like, is it your own experience? Are you reading a lot of slow twitch? Where does it all come from? And so I'm a little critical sometimes with coaches. And obviously there are amazing coaches out there. But I think, especially from me, and that's not my ego talking now, but if you're an athlete and you went through the non-drafting kind of genre, and then it's the drafting genre, and then you do the long distance, and you've kind of seen it all, and you've been there. I had different countries. I was born and raised in Germany in the national team and the Olympic training center. And then I went to the US and learned the college system. And then I became Luxembourgish, and that's a different system. And so I've seen so many different perspectives, and I figured, man, it makes sense to filter that all down and tell people what it's all about, because then there's also this big triathlon industry that just wants to sell products and gadgets and all this stuff. But to be quite honest, at the end of the day, when you want to race and pace yourself properly in an Ironman, in a long distance event, there's not that many gadgets that you need, because it's very, very dedicated work. And then, of course, there's a part in the book that talks about training. There's a part that talks about the material in general. But if you know the details, for instance, the amount of draft, the percentage that goes in your bike, into rolling resistance and all that stuff, the bike is not making the final call if you're going to be a super biker or not. Because when I raced my first Hawaii, I was on a no-name bike. And I rode the 5th fastest ever time in Hawaii. So it's possible, right? Because that was not a very aerodynamic bike. All the cables were hanging out. And it was basically it was an aero bike, but it was definitely far away from what we see now. The Canyons, the Treks, the Scots, all those kind of bikes, the Gerelos and whatnot. And I felt the urge of telling people what it's really about, like the core structure. Like if you do certain things, you cannot go wrong. There's always fine tuning. And so when I looked at the book, I wanted to talk to two people. I wanted to talk to a beginner that comes into the sport and that wants to learn really what is triathlon and how to do it right. And then I want to talk to the motivated age group athlete that is a solid athlete, let's say a 12 to 14 hour athlete for long distance who wants to do a 9:30 or sub 9. And so I target those two groups that I actually talk to, because all this knowledge, it's in my head. And by coaching an individual person, I tell every other person the same thing over and over again. So I thought, man, just make a guideline, just really simplify it, put it down like little things. For instance, Adam, you're in New York, obviously, if you have those winter conditions for training over the winter, so how in the world would you go to, let's say, Mexico or somewhere South America and race in February, in March, and expect to be in a great shape? It's just, those strategic points. So I filtered them all out. I threw them all in there. And obviously, I wrote a couple of stories from my own experience, but not for ego purposes to tell people how cool I am, how many races I can win. I just wanted to really give a guide for people that really understand what it's about, because it's not rocket science, but there are certain things you have to do and certain things you should not do. Right. I have a lot of do's and don'ts in there and stuff like that, and that's basically what my motivation was. And I got amazing feedback. I mean, when I look on Amazon now and I look at all the reviews, I'm pretty stoked. It's a different book than some of the other pro athletes wrote. Chrissy is an exception. She's doing an excellent job with her book. But there are some other guys out there that just say, well, this is what I did, and if you do the same thing, you're going to win as well. But it's not about winning. It's your personal goals, it's your personal obstacles that you have to overcome. And if you make a sub 10, maybe that's your championship race. That is your, you are a champion if you set that goal in stone and you followed through and you made it, and you are a champion. Yeah. And it's not about just winning and getting medals. Of course, for the pro athletes, it is. But, for let's say the majority, the 99% of athletes that race a triathlon, and it doesn't really matter which event, if it's, WTC or a challenge or a half distance or whatnot, or even the ITU, has a different format. And yeah, I just want people to have fun and don't do the typical mistakes, because, when you go to Hawaii, you see all this panic training like days before the race to double check if they can really dash a mile in sub 5 or I don't know what,
Yeah.
Just follow those guidelines and you cannot go wrong,
Right. Yeah. So it sounds like the book, Art of Triathlon Training, is really, it gives you a set of tools that you could pull from to kind of approach the sport from the right perspective, right? You're not dictating this is the only way to do something, but these are tools that you can use and recommendations to kind of have success, right?
Absolutely. And what I want people to realize is that every person is different, and what's so important, the best training plan, and those coaches that charge $400, $500, $700 a month, they give you a plan, but the best plan does not help you if they don't listen to you, if they don't understand you, if they don't know your weekly structure. And that's how I would always start. Like, write down, first of all, what do you want to achieve? And then you have to talk to your support team. You have to talk to your family, like check your finances. How much is your vacation time? Like, where do you want to race and where are you in the world? Like all those restrictions. It's one huge formula. And once you figure that out, then you need to go down in the micro kind of cycle, the weekly or the even the 3 days training, 1 day off, 2 day training, 1 day off, those kind of things, those smaller cycles where you say, okay, well, on Mondays I can't because I have the kids. And then on Tuesday, blah, 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 all those things. So you got to put that all into consideration on what days you can do what. And if you standardize, we as humans, we like to have a little routine, and that makes it so much easier and controllable and checkable and data and all this thing. And I just want people to understand that it's really important to have a logical approach of the restriction that everybody has with job, with family, with weather condition, climate conditions, and so on. And that's what I consider a helpful guide for everyone.
Yeah. And so I was reading the synopsis. I admittedly haven't read the book yet, but I definitely plan to, especially after hearing all about it. I'm like really excited now. So, but a couple of things in the synopsis that I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts or philosophy on, because there are things that I really haven't covered, or at least one of them I haven't covered on this podcast before, which is, I've read in the synopsis, it talked about the fear of open water swimming. So yeah, I think that's every beginner's fear, right? So what are some of your recommendations around that? I mean, for me, a lot of it was just, get in there and keep doing it. But is there anything that you recommend or kind of because that seems to be the biggest entry or barrier to entry to the sport, is that particular piece?
The fear is one of the things that limit us in life in general. If it is taking a new job, if it is moving to a new country, or even talking to the person that you feel attracted to, fear is always the killer. And if you think about sport, if you picture this pre-race atmosphere with all the nervous athletes standing around, and then you're a little unsure about the open water. And as a pro, you kind of, you just start with like between 50 and whatever, 60, 70 athletes. But if you're in the first big wave, I mean, now they changed it a little bit and they have these rolling waves. But before, it could happen you start with like 1,000 or like nearly 2,000 people at the same time. And that is scary. That's crazy. I mean, I would be afraid of that too. But here's the thing. Every time you are afraid, well, then you got to figure out, why is that? Is that the people? Are you afraid of not breathing? And if you figure that out, let's assume you've never swum in open water. Well, that's an easy task, because you can try that in a lake, maybe not in Florida because they got gators, but
yeah,
water. And you can go in the ocean. And I'm afraid of sharks, so I have hardly done any open water sessions. I mean, if I do that, I need a bunch of people around me, like just to reduce the chances that the shark is going to pick on me.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer of risk aversion, and
it's a good strategy.
Yeah, definitely. Marco Albert, because he's a little bit bigger than me. So I figured if the shark would attack, you go for the big fish, right? You don't take the little fish next to them.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, if there's somebody and he's next to me, well, he hopefully,
Exactly. Yeah. My strategy always has been with open water is as long as I'm not the fastest or slowest swimmer, I'm in the middle of the pack, the shark's not getting me. So.
Yeah. Well, I thought that's right, but then a couple of years ago, I think you might remember that there was a big incident in California. There was a a veteran triathlete, I think 60, 65 years old. He was attacked out of a group, and just by accident, the shark picked him.
Wow.
There were like 15 people. So, and then I started thinking about this strategy that you just mentioned, and I thought, well, you're not even safe in the middle of the pack anymore. So the good thing is, I was a good swimmer, and I was blessed with my swimming abilities. I don't know where they came from, but when you come out in Hawaii second and third and fifth out of the water, then you don't have to really train open water because it works. But if you're not that super blessed with those conditions, then you should practice that in a 50-meter pool or 25-yard pool. It doesn't matter. But you swim with people together, like in close proximity, and you gotta get a feel for let's say you swim with like 4 people straight side by side in one lane. Obviously, if there's traffic, you can't do that. But if you have a closed lane and you can do some specific training workouts, you can practice that. And you need to prepare mentally that you're going to get an elbow, that you're going to swim over somebody, that you might have to hold your breath for a second. And the more you practice that, the more you familiarize yourself with that situation, I believe then it takes away the fear. But it only works by repetition. And so there's a lot of things you can do. But at the end of the day, it's also racing is the best practice for your peak race. That's why we do practice races or a preparation race. And we always want to perform, but you just define where you want to perform, and then there are races as a tune-up and whatnot, and then you can practice certain things. And I believe you just have to put yourself in a situation, and then it gets much better.
From a swimming perspective, I'm not a good swimmer. I learned swimming when I was in my mid-30s, so I struggle. But the thing is, I always approach that open water swimming in the races as sort of like, I'm not a spiritual person, but like a Zen type of thing. Keep my heart rate down, just get relaxed, and just whatever happens, happens. And it seems to have worked for me. I was even one time in a race kicked in the face, and I came out of the water bleeding with a black eye, and it didn't bother me. So it's just about keeping that heart rate down and kind of relaxed. So it's a really interesting topic. It's not one I've really spoken about on the podcast before, so thanks for covering it. Another thing I wanted to touch on was the mental game. So that is something I've talked to a lot of triathletes about, and professionals and amateurs and coaches. But I mean, what is your philosophy there? I mean, that's part, to go to that next level. So let's say you talked about that, I don't know, that 13, 14 hour Ironman, want to go down to 10 or 9 or qualify for Kona. There a lot of it's mental. So, what is your approach there? What is your recommendations?
Well, I mean, you need to always think ahead of the game. There's something that I started doing in 2007, and that's called the ultimate intention statement. And what it is, it's basically 2 months before your race, you already act like the race already happened, but not by any facts that you say, well, I swam, I came out in third, and then, and then I stayed in the first group, or I was in the second pack and I made my way up. All you do is that you go through the emotions, and you just feel comfortable with what is about to happen, and you just write down like a summary as if you give an interview, but just purely focused on positive emotions by projecting in on that peak race that you're about to perform. And by doing that over a long period of time, and maybe twice a day, you become so comfortable with the idea, and you have so many good emotions. I mean, it's all, first of all, it's a repetition for your brain, and that always works. Then it's just what's the English word? Familiarization with the feeling, with the positive attitude. Like, I'm gliding through the water. I felt the water. I had a really good push with my arm stroke, pushed backwards, and I was catapulting myself to the front. And I felt at ease on the bike, and all pedal strokes were smooth. I was going through the wind, super aerodynamic. And, if you phrase it like that way, and then when you come to the race, you feel so much better about it. There's no anxiety before. You're not afraid of, for instance, the open water swimming, or certain pressure that you have to perform a certain time and stuff. And so it's a sort of visualization as well. And that's what I told my athletes before the race. You need to go through from wherever you start till the finish line. You need to know where you're going, and you go through it like several times in your head. You swim, this is the right turn at the buoy. Okay, second loop. Then you come out of the water. Do you run up the ramp? My bike is on the third alley on the right side. You run through, you grab your bike, and then I run to the mountain. Then I swing my right leg over. The helmet was already on. I got the bottles in there, and you're going through the motions and you see yourself at that place where it's about to happen. You feel so much more at ease and it becomes natural to you because you kind of done it. You've done it like several times in your head. And that's why if you've done it certain times, it's like driving a car,
right.
And driving a stick shift is super hard for some people, But then if you've been driving for 20 years, do you ever think about shifting gears again? No, because you've done it 1,000 times. And that's the power of repetition. And so you can really trick your mind by doing that a little bit.
Yeah. So in terms of this book, I noticed that you're also selling it like within a package of other books and videos and things. I just wanted to briefly touch on those other items because they sound really interesting. And one of them is the 10 Commandments of Aerodynamics. So I'm really excited about this topic. I don't want to get too much detail because we're almost out of time. But I mean, that's an area where there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of sort of throwing expensive dollars at, minimal gains. And there's things that people ignore like body position and things like that. But I mean, just kind of talk about like biggest misconceptions, biggest misinformation out there on aerodynamics.
That's a great point because everybody thinks you can buy speed. You buy the newest bike and you don't have to train anymore because it's so much faster and you save like 15% watts or 15 watts per hour. That means you can do this. And no, this is all. You gotta train, and the material and the rolling resistance and the little ceramic pulleys and the super coated chain and all those kind of things, that all sums up to like this. I don't want to give you the exact number, but it's like 2 to 3% of everything. So that's not gonna make the difference. But if you know that 75% is your body position, you know that you need to invest much more into a proper bike fitting, maybe even a wind tunnel or something like this, instead of just focusing on okay, that tire is supposed to be so much better and it costs 3 times the amount than the other tires. And then you got to figure out if you want to have a tubular or a clincher. And then you see Jan Frodeno using the new Oakley helmet. Maybe you need to have that helmet because he's riding so much faster. You cannot copy your neighbor's material because every bike position is unique, and your position on the bike, if your back is arched nicely, it's actually much better. And people think, oh, look at his back, he doesn't have a straight back. But therefore, then you need to know that you need a certain helmet to cover that hole between your head and the back, so where your neck has a little ditch down there, which you can cover with a long tail helmet. But people always look at pictures and say, well, this guy looks so aero, or this guy looks so aero. We had this discussion about Sanders on his bike. He looks like a bulldog, like super strong, his legs coming out on the side. He's pushing enormous wattage, right? And then you have Patrick Lange, who's such a tiny little guy. And he's just using barely 270 watts in order to ride the same pace. What he needs for like 315 or 320, And so it's a very complex topic. And luckily, I had the honor in my career to work with Mike Girard from Phoenix, Arizona area, and he has been one of the guys that advised a lot of super pro athletes. And he is a co-author of the book. And he has so much knowledge, and without him, I wouldn't have produced my bike times, to be quite honest. And I was in the wind several times with him. And if we talk about aerodynamic, another book is the coaching book. And I had the honor of being with one of the best coaches in the world. Like he's a world champion coach because he produced several world champions. And I asked him, man, why are you producing so much more top athletes than so many other coaches? And then he started talking, and I said, man, I got to prepare something. And I did the same with him. So we co-worked basically on those 2 books. And one is coaching, one is the aerodynamic book. And then there's a long video of over 20 minutes about injury. Because you can have all the knowledge in the world to train and do it right. But maybe you get injured because of a stupid mistake of the wrong shoes or whatnot. And then you need to know, first of all, you got to figure out if you're injured or if you're just sore. And for an athlete, you live with a normal level of soreness anyways, because you're always sore. And then you got to figure out what happens when you get an injury. When is it serious? When do you need to stop pushing? And then the first measurements, what do you do in terms of icing or heat and all this there's so much information. It was just not enough for one book. The book is already 300. Well, in Europe it's different. It's 340 pages in Europe, and in the US it's 299 pages, and that's just because of different formatting. But I couldn't cramp all the information in, so I had to write different books. And then I came up with the idea of doing a video about the injury. Then I had an audio, a guided meditation, because I think there's a lot of things also in your head. You know, when you think about training, 99.9% you train your body, but you know, if your mind is not right, now how can your body perform? That's when I started thinking about, man, it's so powerful. I've been doing meditation for over 6 years. I've been doing so much mental work. I worked with several mental coaches in my career, and I think a lot of people have never tried it. And that's why I did a video with a mental coach to cover the basics, and then I gave a sample meditation, because meditation is just a good tool to just be aware, you know, of the race situation, and to be okay the way stuff is. And you know, during a race you have to always adapt to every situation, and you know, if you put emotions in it, then it gets really sketchy sometimes. And that's a great tool just to learn about the mental aspect. And it all came together, and there's now 5 books, and now it's a whole book package. And at the beginning I had one book, and it got really complex, and you know, and then I didn't have a publisher, because I thought, no, I just want to do it myself. Why not? And I created this whole thing, a platform, and it's on my blog, and how to download it, and you know, shopping cart and all those kind of stuff. So I was busy as crap for a long time, and now it's all done, released in October, and people love it. I mean, I'm really stoked. I got so much good feedback, and Slow with Twitch just did a huge feature, and several podcasts now. I had a TV show, radio show, and you know, it's just amazing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, Dirk, this sounds awesome. I mean, thank you, you know, for putting it together, because it's just a gold mine of information, and you've covered, you know, you're covering so many important topics and things. And it's just, you know, I've read a lot of triathlon books, and, you know, I haven't read this yet, so I'm not giving it a review, but at the same time, from what you describe, it's unique in the sense of the way all the different information you have and the topics you're covering. It sounds fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, you will not be disappointed. I promise you that. And that's why I gave even people 100% money back guarantee, because man, if you don't like it, I mean, it's impossible. This is like, it's written from the heart, and it's written with knowledge. It's not a product to make money, because there is no money in a book. First of all, I'm giving away the profits to 2 organizations, and that's for an orphan organization that I've been an ambassador for many, many years. And then there's another organization, or a foundation, To Walk Again, and that was Mark Harriman's, who was an incredible athlete. He was 6 in Hawaii, and then suddenly a drunk driver kicked him off the road, and he's been sitting in a wheelchair ever since. And he made this huge movement in Europe to walk again, and does spinal cord research and all that stuff, and that's where the money goes to. So you're doing something really good by buying the book. You're supporting this project, and I think that's a no-brainer then.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll put the information on my website, but for those people who are interested in finding out more, I mean, what is your website, or where's the best place for them to go to buy the books?
Okay. Well, so first of all, you could go to Amazon. It's a little bit more expensive there, but it's worldwide. And there's Kindle. But I put the package together as an ebook package with the audios, with the videos, and they're all on my blog. And the blog is called Live and Let Try, and we all remember the Guns N' Roses, Live and Let Die. You know, that's the Live and Let Try. TRI is the blog, and all the books are described there. There's even a free download if you want to read. I think 15 or 18 pages are free that I show you guys what the book is all about. Yeah, that's what it is. And right now I'm planning a little book tour in the US, because I had so many requests of signed copies, and I didn't know how to do that, because I cannot have signed copies everywhere in the world. So I have a storage here in Europe where I sign a lot of copies and ship them out, and I'm going to do the same in the US now, and that goes all through the Facebook fan page. You basically just have to send a check or PayPal, and I send the book with whatever you would like to have on the first page, and I not only sign, but I write a little personal note in there, and then I send it out to you as soon as possible.
Awesome. Sounds awesome. Well, thank you so much. I'll put the information up on my website as well for those who are interested. But Dirk, thank you so much for sharing your passion for the sport. I mean, you have so much information and passion about it. So, it's really a treasure that you're sharing this with all of us, and I'm looking forward to reading it. And again, thanks for your time.
Cool, Adam. Thank you so much, and good luck with your own training. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.